Gong Hei Fa Choi. They say these videos should possibly not be done seasonally, but then I'm a person of the season and I like being in the moment, so happy Chinese New Year. Today I'm going to be reviewing a camera that is actually not made anymore. This is the Fujifilm 3D camera produced about 10 years ago, and the camera is no longer manufactured by Fujifilm. Yet this camera has become the standard of 3D photography, even to this day. So when people look at 3D cameras, this is the benchmark that people still to this very day are comparing their 3D cameras to. And why is that? Basically, 3D cameras have not advanced a lot since the manufacture of this camera. There's other cameras that have come about since then that also do 3D type photography, but not a point and shoot camera like this. I have not yet found a replacement for this camera, which is ironic in that most technical assets these days depreciate, but this camera is actually appreciated, and you will find this for thousands of dollars when you go shopping around, even today, looking for this camera. So let me just for a moment compare this camera to some other cameras that are more recent or other solutions that you can use to do 3D photography, and then point out why this camera is still living on today. So one of the solutions that I've done a video on already is this Cooler BB, which is an attachment to your mobile phone. And this, whilst being a good solution, needs post-processing. The left and right image is not necessarily perfectly aligned, so you need to do post-processing, which is done in the application, but still there is not perfect alignment of the images that are taken. Whereas with this camera, the left and right eye is perfectly aligned right from the word go. It's hardware aligned. There's no software alignment necessary in order to get the two images aligned, which is quite nice for making photos in the moment without having to do any post-processing. Then you have other cameras, such as this Vuz camera. This Vuz camera is a virtual reality camera, and whilst it can take 3D photos, it is more complicated to use. It's not the sort of camera that you would just pick up, look through a viewfinder and take a shot. For one, there is no viewfinder. There is no LCD screen on this. You basically need to hook this up to a mobile phone, move away from it, because it takes a photo 360 degrees around it. And it's also a heavy camera, so it's much heavier to carry around than your Fujifilm 3D point and shoot camera. So whilst this can take good quality 3D photos in a surround fashion, it is not all that practical to take with you to take a quick 3D shot somewhere. And to view it, you would also need to have virtual goggles like this. So you need to have virtual reality hardware in order to then view the images that you create. So again, not as practical as just looking at a image with just left eye, right eye stereoscopic viewing. And then of course you do have your more complex setups if you want to do more than just point and shoot, such as this rig here, where you set up two cameras side by side, and with that you would then need to have a remote trigger. That remote trigger is then hooked up to these radios so that the cameras fire simultaneously. Obviously this is much heavier, but does produce good results, but does need a lot more setup. So comparing these different solutions, this point and shoot camera is practical, easy to carry around, creates photos for you with a left and right eye separation that is realistic. So when I open up this camera, you'll see that there is a lens on the right hand side and a lens on the left hand side, and the eye separation of those is very similar to your actual eyes. So the images that are taken have a realistic 3D perspective. Now that's not always what you want to have. Sometimes you want to have a narrow perspective when you're very close up to something, or a wider perspective when you take a photo of something further away. And that's the reason why binoculars, for example, have a wider separation, because you're looking at something further away. You're looking at something that needs more perspective, and the left and right eye needs to be more separated. You can't do that with this camera, but you can do that with a rig like this, for example. You basically take those cameras further apart, and you have the flexibility of taking more stereoscopic perspectives with that. So it is limited, but it is, from a practical perspective, a very easy camera to carry around. Now, you may be surprised that most of my 3D photography does not use this camera. Most of my 3D photography is just a single shot left eye and a single shot right eye taken at different times. And that's the easiest way with any camera. You don't need a 3D camera to do that, obviously, to take 3D shots. But that can only be done when the object that you're taking a photo of is stationary. You need to have a camera such as this, or a rig like this with a radio, in order to be able to take simultaneous shots of the left eye and the right eye at the same time. And that's where a camera like this comes in really handy. So if you take photos of people, or if you take photos of something that is moving, a car or a waterfall or a water fountain, to pick up this small little camera, open it up and take a quick shot is very practical and very easy to use. So that's a bit of an introduction of why I'm doing a review of the Fujifilm 3D camera. It is a benchmark. It is a camera that we want to compare other cameras against. And if we are going to compare cameras against this, we need to understand the benchmark that we are comparing against. And that is why we're doing a review of this Fujifilm 3D W3 camera. Okay, so before we go into the details of the camera, I just want to make a comment about what Fujifilm has achieved through making this camera. So one of the achievements is the file format that is used for 3D photo taking. Fujifilm has used a new format with this camera called the MPO format. And that has today become an industry standard for 3D photography. It's not just used by this camera, but it is used by other devices and other software as well. This camera also takes video. Video is still what was, I guess, the norm 10 years ago, so it's not that great. The video is in the format of a proprietary AVI file, and that AVI file has multiple streams in it, two streams, one for the left eye and one for the right eye. That is not the standard that is used today. Today, the standard is simply taking two video streams and literally placing them side by side. It's called the SBS format, the side-by-side format. And that is what most 3D TVs can accept. It is what YouTube accepts. It has become the standard today. So this hasn't set the standard so much for video, but certainly has for 3D image taking. Okay, so now with that, let's have a look at some of the features of this camera. One, obviously, is that it has two lenses, one for the left eye and one for the right eye. And as I said before, those lenses are spaced roughly the eye distance of an average person, which gives it the ability to produce natural stereoscopic imagery. The cover nicely protects both lenses when you shut it all at the same time. It's quite thick. So the lenses are uncovered and covered up simultaneously. The other nice part about this camera is, and one of the great features of this camera, is the LCD screen. The LCD screen of this camera is actually a 3D display. It is a lenticular 3D display that allows you to see images as you take them without glasses in 3D. The disadvantage of just having an LCD screen is that you don't have a viewfinder on this camera, and in bright sunlight that becomes a bit of a problem because you don't actually see the LCD screen. But for other situations, that is a great asset, as you can actually see in 3D what you're taking. Other features are a parallax adjustment that you see here at the top of the camera. That allows you to adjust either prior to taking a photo or even retrospectively the depth of a photo. So you can adjust whether an object, for example, is in front of the screen or behind the screen. So you have control over the depth that you have of your 3D image. Another feature of the 3D camera is that you have a HDMI cable that you can plug in here, that you can directly plug into any 3D compatible HDMI device, such as your 3D TV, and you can stream directly from this camera any videos that you've taken to your 3D TV, or watch any images that you've taken in your MPO format. Having two lenses obviously has the benefit that you can take 3D photography, but it has other benefits as well that Fujifilm have taken advantage of. Having two lenses allows you to take simultaneous shots that are different as well, not just the same. Obviously you want them to be the same if you want to take 3D images, but it allows you, for example, to have one lens zoomed out and one lens zoomed in and take something simultaneously with a zoomed in and zoomed out shot, or other parameters that you want to set differently. And that is a nice feature to have if you want to take something at the same time but differently. And often you may be in the situation where you have a scenario that you want to take a photo of. You would like to have the benefit of taking a second photo, but by the time you take a second photo, that situation is no longer there. With this camera, you have two cameras in one, so you don't just have the ability to take stereoscopic photos, but you also have the ability to take two different type of photos, which is quite nice. With that, let's get into the detail of some of these features. Okay, let's have a look at the exterior of this camera, and I will be focusing in on the 3D features here. The 2D features, there's lots of information out there in other areas. My focus will be on the 3D features of this camera only. The camera comes with two 10 megapixel lenses. They are top quality lenses, as you would expect from Fujifilm. In fact, from what I understand, they have a prism system inside them that project what it sees downwards into the camera, extending its effective focal length, and allowing the 3D zoom that this camera is featured with. It also has a parallax control. Parallax is the control of where objects are positioned relative to the screen. So you can have objects behind the screen, or you can position objects in front of the screen or at the same level as the screen. And the positioning of that, similar to a zoom control, can be controlled with this parallax control. So if you have an object that is behind the screen, using this parallax control, you can then bring that forward and possibly even bring it forward out of the screen itself. There is also this timer light although it says 3D on it, it doesn't really have much to do with 3D. It is a selfie timer, so don't confuse that light with any of the 3D features. On the rear of the camera, we have, of course, our 3D lenticular screen, which is quite a feature of this camera. It allows you to view, as I've stated, the images that you take without glasses in 3D by looking straight onto that screen. It also comes with a 3D HDMI output port that allows you to hook up this camera to devices that support HDMI 1.4, such as 3D TVs. It also has a 3D indicator and a 3D button. That is for you to be able to switch on the 3D effects of the camera or switch them off. So for example, if you are on a image that is 3D, you can view that in 2D by switching off the 3D, and the 3D indicator light will then also go off to indicate that you're viewing it in 2D. And then there is this light that you have that indicates that it basically will flash green when the lenses have focused. The important thing here is that it will go green when both lenses have focused. It's no use just having one lens focused and the other not. That will turn green when both lenses of the camera have focused. I quite like the screen that comes with this camera, you've probably gathered. It makes this camera not just a camera for shooting images, but also for viewing them. It is a small screen, but you can still view them in full 3D without glasses. Fujifilm specifies the screen to have 1,150,000 dots. Now, I had a closer look at the screen myself. I counted the pixels across and down and established that the screen is a WVGA screen. So it's 800 by 480 pixels, which gives you a total of 384,000 pixels. So on the surface, that doesn't match the specification that Fujifilm have specified. But and it took me a while to figure this out. But as I was trying to reconcile what this difference is, but I noticed that Fujifilm does not say 1,150,000 pixels. It uses the word dots. And they are actually right. There is that many dots. And the reason that is that they do not interpret a dot to mean a pixel. They interpret a dot to mean the subpixel. And there is a dot for red, there is a dot for green, there is a dot for blue. Then if you were to divide this by 3, because of the 3 colors, you actually end up with the same resolution that I have come up with when I counted the pixels. Quite cheeky of Fujifilm, I find, but they are right. There is that many dots on there. You just got to make sure you don't interpret a dot to mean a pixel. We also need to remember that we have a left eye view and a right eye view. That effectively splits the resolution in half on the horizontal direction. You get 400 by 480 pixels in one view in the left eye, and you get the same for the right view as well. That then gives you a total view resolution of 400 by 480 pixels. For those of you who've watched my video on the Snap 3D from Mopic, you will have noticed that the view resolution of this is similar to that of the Snap 3D for the Samsung Galaxy S8. It has a view resolution of 592 by 480. That's the same vertical resolution, and it's a little wider in the horizontal direction. Now, when you think about that, don't you think that this is somewhat surprising? Here we are, 10 years down the track. We have a smartphone that has a much higher pixel resolution and this camera. Yet in the end, the resolution of each view you are left with is not that much improved. The resolution is not just halved, but is reduced 15-fold by the Snap 3D. I'm thinking of making a separate video to give the technical explanation of what is happening here. It's an interesting case. For purposes here, as this is a review of the camera, I will leave the question open to whet your appetite a bit. Suffice to say that underpinning this is the fact that Fujifilm has full control of the manufacturing process, allowing it to perfectly match screen and lenticular pictures, the orientation of subpixels, and has control over positioning and slant, of which there is none, by the way, to minimize the Moore effect. There is, after all, then a cost associated with matching a lenticular lens with a third-party screen where you don't have control over these things. Also keep in mind that the Snap 3D has eye tracking, which this screen does not. Anyway, keep an eye out for this video where I will explain this in more detail. I've put this visual here together so that you can see the relative resolutions that you can take with this camera. For images, there are 3 settings. There is a large, a medium, and a small, and each one also comes with 3 different form factors. On the video side, you have the HD 720p and also a couple of smaller sizes with higher frame rates. Overall, the largest image that you can take is pretty decent even in today's standards, with roughly around 4K. The video resolution, not so much. We're talking about the equivalent, or we are talking about 720p. You have to remember, lastly, that each of those resolutions is duplicated. You have that resolution once for your left eye and once for your right eye. Let's just quickly go through all of the 3D specific items in the shooting mode of this camera. So I'll start off with the automatic mode. So I'll set it to automatic. In automatic, it takes 3D shots if you've got it set to 3D. You can take 2D shots as well by pressing the 3D button, and that toggles the 3D or 2D mode. If you take 2D, it'll just take a JPEG. If you do 3D, it'll take a JPEG and an MPO. Now, the other setting that you have here that's 3D specific, and I'm going to scroll down to them, the other settings that you see here are not, is the parallax. So you've got a auto parallax control. And what that does is allow you to set the camera such that when you shoot, it already makes automatic adjustments to parallax for you. If you have that off, then it just takes the right and left eye as it happens to be without making those adjustments. But you can have it in automatic, where based on the scene, it will make those adjustments for you. Okay, so now with that, let's go to the next mode. So I'll turn the dial to Advanced 3D. And Advanced 3D is a mode that allows you to take control of what the left eye and the right eye distance is. It doesn't take advantage of the 2 lenses here, it just takes advantage of one of those lenses. It takes one photo, then you need to move to the side, and it takes another photo. Now, there is some settings associated with that. So there's a manual and an automatic mode associated with this advanced setting. In a manual, you have to press the trigger button for both of those images. So for the left eye, then you step aside and you take the right eye and you press the trigger button for both of those. In automatic mode, it's timed. And the assumption here is that you are in some sort of moving vehicle. or you are somehow moving in a direction that allows you to have this timed and have the time determine the left eye, right eye distance. So you trigger once and it will take 2 consecutive shots based on an interval. The other setting here is turn. What that allows you to do is determine which direction you're going to be moving. Are you moving from left to right or from right to left? And apart from that, there's no other 3D specific settings in this mode. So we'll move on to the next one. And the next one is the advanced 2D setting. And in the advanced 2D setting, it's a 2D mode. So you're not taking advantage of any of the 3D features. You are, however, taking advantage of the fact that you've got 2 lenses. By taking simultaneous shots with different settings for each lens. With this, you have the ability, and I think I mentioned this before, to take a wide angle and a zoomed in photo at the same time. But there's other settings you can have changed as well between the left and the right lens. In this mode here, you can have 2 different types of color settings. And here you can have 2 different ISO settings. Okay, apart from that, there is no 3D specific items in here. This next mode here, the program setting, the aperture priority setting, and the manual setting, they are standard settings, of course, that you have on most cameras. I'm not going to go into any details here. They do take advantage of both lenses, so you are taking 3D photos, but there's no 3D specific settings associated with those. So I'll turn the wheel to get to our special scenes, and what that allows you to do is set the camera to special scenes, which are also available on many cameras. Again, not specifically a 3D feature, but I will just quickly scroll through them so you can see what there is. So you've got an anti-blur, naturals, natural light, portrait, landscape, sport, a night scene with a tripod, sunset scenes, snow scenes, beach scenes, underwater. Now this camera does actually come with an option of an underwater case. Again, that was 10 years ago, obviously, when the camera came out, and you might be hard pressed to get that case, but it did come with that option. Also a mode for indoor events, and then we're back to our original setting. Now we'll move on to the next setting, which is the same thing. So it's basically got 2 of these special scene settings. The reason for that is so that you can preset those and swap between them quickly when you want to go from one scene that you commonly use to another one that you would commonly use. And then that takes us back to automatic. So those are all of the different modes and 3D specific items associated with those. All right, next let's have a look at some of the standard settings that this camera comes with. So for that, I will go across to the spanner, and I will only go through the 3D settings that are relevant for us. I'm starting from the top here. The settings that are relevant for 3D, the first few are not, so I'm just going to skip over all those until we get to the one that is. And the first one that is relevant for us is this optical axis control. And what that allows us to do is, if there happens to be some misalignment between the left and right camera, the left and right lenses, you can make adjustments to lower the left lens image or to raise the left hand image. Also, with this next setting, the 3D recording setting, you have the option of selecting whether you want both MPO and JPEG files to be recorded, or just a MPO file when you take 3D shots. If you have both, then you have the ability to look at a 2D image with JPEG for devices that can't read MPO. Otherwise, if you just have MPO, then you have your 3D image, but it may not be viewable in all places. Okay. The next setting we want to have a look at is the 3D caution. And what that allows you to do is, if you're prone to fatigue when you're looking at a 3D screen too long, then you can have a warning. After about 30 minutes, a warning comes up indicating you've looked at the screen for 30 minutes. If you turn that off, you won't get that warning. And if you turn it to not 3D display, it will actually prevent you from using the display as a 3D display. Kind of defeats the purpose. We kind of want to use it as a 3D display. So unless you are prone to fatigue, I would suggest that you have it on the warning setting. Okay, and those are the general settings that are relevant for 3D. Okay, and lastly, let's have a look at the settings that relate to your playback mode. So I'm now in playback on the camera, playing back the content that we have on the camera. And the first thing here to note again is the function of the 3D button. The 3D button toggles between 2D mode and 3D mode. In this case, it's only how you view it. Obviously, in the shooting mode, it determines whether you're shooting in 3D or shooting in 2D. Here, it only determines how you are viewing your images on the screen. So we want to view them in 3D. Unfortunately, you won't be able to, because the camera that I'm filming with is not a 3D camera. But trust me, this is in 3D. And it's all going to be about parallax, you'll see as we look at this. So the setting that is relevant for us here is this first one here. The rest of the settings, I'll just scroll through them, are not really relevant for 3D photography. It's this first one here, the parallax control. And worth noting is that when I go into this, you'll see that parallax is already set to +2. It's not 0. And the reason for that is that parallax has already been applied. Automatic parallax has been applied because I had the automatic parallax set at the time I took this image. So the camera has already decided an optimal parallax based on its judgment. And I deliberately chose this image of a bridge because it spans quite a distance. There's a part that's very close to you, and there's a part that's very far away from you, and it's very hard to contain that entire span at the back of the screen without straining your eye, because the back would either be too divergent or the front would either be too divergent. So what the camera has decided to do is to pull that whole image forward towards you in order to have the back not as divergent and allow you to view it more comfortably without causing you too much eye strain. And hence the application of 2 to the parallax. Now we can correct that if we wanted to, or if you forgot to have the camera in auto parallax, you can make these corrections afterwards. I can now, for example, reduce that back to 1 or 0, and we would have the parallax as it would be if it wasn't automatically adjusted. We can even go further if we wanted to. We can pull the entire bridge further into the screen and go -1 or -2. We can also go the other direction. If we want to have the bridge stick out of the screen more, we can go +4 or even further. But generally the automatic setting that the camera finds for you is quite an optimum. And of course then you can save it. Once you're here, you press OK to store it. It stores that image and then you have that parallax. Now you can adjust parallax without going into that setting. You can just go and press the plus or minus on your parallax whilst you are just viewing the image. The difference here is only that it's not saved. So if you go to another image, that parallax that you're now setting would be lost and you would have to set it again. but if you save it by going into the setting, then it's retained. Okay, so that's the settings for an image. Let's just go across and have a look at the settings for a video. All right, so now we'll have a look at the same thing, but in this case a video instead of an image. It's the same bridge. I also took a video going across it, just highlighting, you know, how scary it is walking across one of these bridges. In fact, this is one of the better ones there. There are scarier bridges to walk across. This was quite a well-built bridge, in fact, quite a new one. So to play a video, you simply press on the power button, the downwards button on your dial, and it starts playing that video. And then you can stop it or pause it. Unfortunately, again, you're not seeing this in 3D. I will later in the video show you this in an anaglyph format, so that you can actually view it in 3D if you happen to have some 3D glasses lying around. Okay, so I will stop the video by playing back here. The settings that you have here are again parallax, similar to what you had previously. You can adjust that straight on the screen without it having been saved, or you can go into settings and you can save it as before. So the settings for video from a parallax perspective are pretty much the same. As I said, it's all about parallax. Okay. Apart from that, on videos, you don't really have other 3D relevant settings either. I will just check that just to make sure, but yeah, so there's no other settings that are relevant for 3D. So we've quite exhaustively gone through the menu of the camera to show you all of the relevant 3D settings that are there. All right. Okay, well, there you have it. We now have a benchmark that we can use to compare other products that we'll be reviewing in the future. One thing that I do want to mention, I did make mention of the pricing of what this would cost if you were hunting around for a camera like this today. And I mentioned at the beginning of this video that they are thousands of dollars. I have had another look. There are quite a number of cameras that you can get for less than $1,000. And it's a camera still worth getting. I still use it. So if you do hunt around for a camera like this, just make sure that it is operational. It's not just for spare parts. But I believe that you can still find reasonable priced cameras of the Fujifilm 3D W3. The other thing that's worth noting as well is that it's not a professional camera. It is just a point and shoot camera. And obviously with that, it won't have all of the professional features that you would expect of a professional camera. One of the features that I find missing in this, for example, is manual focus. I wanted the other day to take a photo of the rain as the subject, not the background as a subject. So I wanted to focus on the rain. But how do you do that if you don't have control of the focus? So this video was the review of the camera. I am going to do a second part of this video where we're going to look at the shooting with this camera and processing of images that you get from this camera in more detail. I did find that this video would otherwise be too long. What I will leave you now with is some footage that I've taken with this camera over the years. So thank you for watching this video, and God bless.